speakers and Smithites. This evening, we have the pleasure of speaking to individuals and asking questions around diversity in the workplace. So feel free to all the Smithites who are in the chat to ask questions during the Q&A portion of this event. Also, I would like to say hello as your moderator, Ashley Nicole Bellinger. I'm the reigning Miss Johnson C. Smith University. Now, before we get into this conversation, I believe that it's very important that we truly understand what diversity means. According to Oxford Languages Dictionary, diversity is the practice or quality of involving people from a range of different social and economic backgrounds and of different genders and sexual origins. That being said, can each of the speakers please introduce themselves and give a brief blurb about who they are and what they do? Can we please start with Mr. McLemore?
Hello, my name is Steve McLemore. I've been with Wells Fargo for about 7 years. For the first 6 years, I was working in learning and development, where I was training new financial advisors that flew in from all over the country. I am based here in St. Louis. So we would train them on products, we would train them on prospecting, and just to give them strategies to help them build their business. So I just transitioned into a new role where I'm a business support consultant, and I wear different hats in that role. I do all communications, executive leader communications, D&I communications and newsletters. I manage all of our team sites, and I facilitate courageous conversations for everybody at the home office. And I also help managers facilitate discussions on race with their respective teams. Very early on, we realized that they needed some assistance and some support. And so I have been doing that. So D&I has always been very passionate for me. I enjoy doing it. And I've been doing it in pretty much every job that I've had in my professional career. So I've learned to navigate some of the landmines that may happen when you are facilitating D&I, and I enjoy doing it.
Next, can we please have Ms. Seeley?
Thank you so much. So my name is Blair Seeley. I work at Allstate Insurance Company, and I've worked there for the last 15 years, also in learning and development in various sectors. So our technology organization, and as well as our frontline call center organization. And I lead a team of instructional designers that create the curriculum that we use for training. I also sit on the national board for Allstate's LGBTQ+ employee base and work in my community both as a race-based facilitator and LGBTQIA+ educator.
Thank you for sharing. Can we please now have Mr. Mihalic?
Good evening. Thank you so much for the opportunity. I too, along with my colleague Blair, work at Allstate Insurance. Obviously, we are an insurance company, so we deal in the realm of risk and customer service. I lead an office of individuals who handle first-party medical claims. So in my day job, I am dealing with adjusters and trying to inspire an office of people to reach for more and to meet the needs of our customers. As part of the fun part of my job, I too sit with Blair on our national board for LGBTQ+ and have the honor of serving our company in areas like this, being able to facilitate conversations that deal specific to LGBTQ+ issues. But at Allstate, we pride ourselves on being intersectional. And so when you begin to talk about one area, it's very quick that you start talking about all other areas. And so I echo what Mr. McLemore has already said, and I just thank you for the honor to be here tonight.
We thank you for being able to extend yourself to come. Can we please now have Mr. Goodwin?
Hi, that's me.
Oh!
No, it's totally fine. My full name's Mackenzie, but I go by Mack, and it's kind of the nice little surprise because people think I'm a dude and I'm not, but it's okay. You know, I think it's a funny joke. But hi, everyone. My name is Mack. First, my pronouns are her and she. So I work as a program coordinator for Brooksource. Brooksource is an IT consulting company. We are local here in the Charlotte area and have been for the past 8 years. I've been working for my company for the past 2 years now. And essentially what I do in my role is I oversee 2 programs of ours, which our first one is Elevate, which is our associate level consulting program. And our second one is Project Patriot, which is our national veteran consulting program. So not only do I work with individuals who are active job seekers that would qualify for both those programs, but I work with our clients here in the Charlotte area to make sure that they understand the necessary support that, especially an individual, we work with all people coming from all walks of life, are getting the accurate support that they need. So I'm excited to be here tonight and to collaborate and talk with you all. And yeah, that's me.
Well, I know I already have a question lined up for you that I was writing here to the side. So I know that a lot of the other students have questions for you as well. Can we now please have, as I'm looking to make sure before this time, Mr. Blair.
Hey guys, thank you for allowing us to attend the event today. Really excited to be able to join. Name is Thomas Blair. I happen to be a customer care director for the company Alight Solutions. That's 50-50 of the job. The other part of the job is I'm our overall site director for our Charlotte location. So I've been working with the company about 7 years now. What we do at Alight Solutions is a mix of HR outsourcing and financial services, as well as technology outsourcing. So on my side as the customer care director, I help manage the managers, and they're handling the day-to-day interactions that our colleagues are having with our clients as they're providing these solutions to them. While working at Alight Solutions over the last couple of years, one of the things that I've been extremely passionate about and had the honor to be able to do is serve on our Global Diversity and Inclusion Council. And so it's something that like as soon as I got tapped on the shoulder for, I was ready to go. It's something that's always been near and dear to my heart. And so that's one of the pleasures of working at the job. And then lately, I'm now our corporate sponsor for our Black Professionals Networks for Alight Solutions. And that's one of our colleague-led community groups. We have multiple that we have for our colleagues, but that's the one that I got tapped on the shoulder to be our sponsor. And prior to this year, I was actually the president for that group. And so as I transitioned, took on some different roles, stepped down a little bit, and then just did more on the executive sponsor side of things. So really excited about the event that we have this evening. And, you know, if any questions, feel free to reach out, guys.
Next, Ms. Jacobs.
Hello, and thank you for having me. I am the Chief Diversity Officer for Expedia Logistics, newly appointed to the role. So I've been kind of sitting in this position for the past 45 days, maybe 60 days now. Prior to that, I was a Senior Director of HR leading our North America business. And on the last mile to North America transportation side, about 23 years of HR experience. 50% of that is as a generalist. The other 50% is as a D&I expert. And I'm responsible for helping drive the culture of the organization from an employee engagement perspective, and then ensuring that our focus is driving a diverse, inclusive, and equitable organization where employees feel like they belong. So I'm excited to be here, excited to have the conversations. And if there are any questions, please don't hesitate to ask those.
Last and certainly not least, Ms. Peele.
Sorry about that. I think I was still on mute. I'm Shannon Peele, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I work for a company called LPL Financial, and we are an advisor and broker-dealer company in Fort Mill, South Carolina. And my day job is that I am a procurement analyst for human capital. And then I like to refer to my gay job as I am our Pride Alliance ERG chair. And so we have an employee resource group that I chair for our company. We have one here in Fort Mill, and we also have one in San Diego, Boston, and all of our other locations. And I've been chairing that for about 5 years. I've been with the company for about 8 years. And I just wanted to say hi to all the Smithites. My in-laws both graduated from Johnson C. Smith, and so I feel like I'm among family tonight. So thank you for having me.
It is our pleasure. Now, I have my first question for the panelists, if you guys are ready to answer. That question would be, I noted how, and I'm sure some of the other Smithites on the call also noted, how some of you gave your pronouns. How important do you believe the use of pronouns are in our diverse world today, including the workplace?
I think Mack should go.
Yeah, I wanted to go, but I was like, I don't want to just like jump in here, but I will. No, I think pronouns are very, very important within the workplace. As one of the things, especially as I've been going about my journey with diversity and inclusion, especially with the individuals that I work with, is not only making sure that our culture is diverse and inclusive, but people have a sense of belonging within it. And I think identity is part of that sense of belonging. And so I want, individuals to feel like, hey, kind of like in the beginning, Ashley, how you were like, you know what, I want to know your name, I want to pronounce it right. It's like, hey, I want to use your correct pronouns. Like, I want to know how you want to identify yourself as, and I want to make sure that I'm holding not only myself accountable, but my peers accountable as well. So I think utilizing pronouns creates that sense of belonging, and that's what helps create that sense of belonging within the workplace as well.
Does anybody else also have an answer?
I totally agree.
Yes. No, you go.
I totally agree. It's on my email signature at work.
Yeah.
And it is also on my business card. And it's just one extra way that you can demonstrate inclusivity. It takes the guesswork out of it. And it helps people to be seen as well as being heard.
So I mentioned earlier that one of my learning and development accountabilities is our call centers at Allstate. And one of the things that we've been working on this year is making sure that we make it somewhat an institutional culture that when somebody calls in to our call center, we're providing our pronouns proactively so that a caller feels comfortable, disclosing their pronouns as well. And also from an employee journey and a customer experience journey, being able, if you're calling in and you're transgender and you're trying to change the name on your insurance policy, we want you to feel comfortable knowing that you can disclose that to us and we can change your policy without any sort of risk, right? So the same being for our employees, we want to make sure that you are being pronounced correctly from people who are calling in. So it's a mutual respect, I would say.
Does anybody
and
else
I was going to say, to kind of carry out what Mack said, it's about belonging, right? And it's about creating an environment where people and individuals feel like they belong. What's important to me may not be important to the next person, but if I'm an ally, I am understanding and extending my arm and extending my hand to make sure I'm having an environment or creating an environment where others feel as if they belong. And so your pronouns and the use of pronouns in the work environment are critically important to that and to help setting that culture. I do think a lot of organizations are on the journey to understanding the use of pronouns and how to use them effectively, when to use them effectively. And it's okay to lead with it and be the example by starting out and introducing yourself with your pronouns to help set the tone.
Mm-hmm.
And then if I can just add one other thing, it is so pervasive in the way that we've all grown up in almost every culture where politeness reigns. And something that I learned recently, and I'm not the youngest person here, but even in my older age, I learned last year this idea of gendered honorifics and how it's so easy for us to say yes, sir, and yes, ma'am. And how that's just kind of a part of a polite society. I will tell a brief story. Just yesterday, I was sharing with a manager who's actually being redeployed to a new manager. And the new manager that they're being redeployed to, I know the name, I've never met them. And the name is spelled D-A-N-A. And I don't know, A, if that's Dana I don't know B, if that's Dana. I don't know C, if it's some other pronunciation. And I certainly can't make the assumption that Dana, Dana, or whomever is either male or female. So when I was relaying this information to one of my managers, they were like, oh, well, she's, I'm going to look her up. And I was like, let's just be careful here of not assuming things that quickly, because your new manager, however they're going to introduce themselves, allow them to do that. And I think to the point of what I've heard some other people say, it is important, as much as we can break down barriers and remove instant obstacles, the whole idea of not judging a book by its cover, it works with us as well.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to that too, speaking also from the ally voice. It starts a conversation. So a lot of people are like, why do you give your pronouns, or why are they in your Outlook signature? Especially with us being advisor facing, we have a lot of advisors that ask why that's in our Outlook signature. And so I think it just broadens our reach to be able to tell our story and give a platform for where we stand. And it starts a conversation with people that don't necessarily use the lingo or are familiar with the lingo. And it also is the beginning of the place of where to start practicing, because even if you prefer they and them, that's not a natural way of speaking. And so you have to really practice using the they, them pronouns. So I just wanted to add that.
Well, if we have no more comments on that question, I have another one. And this is open for everybody, but I pulled this directly from what Mr. McLemore said when he said he navigates landmines. So within your career field, what are some of the biggest landmines that you've either had to navigate or pivot from?
So until recently, with all the racial unrest and so forth, you had these three cardinal rules. You don't talk about race, religion, or politics at work. And so as a result of what's been happening, our managers have been told to reach out and start having these conversations. And so there was no support. There were no talking points, and you had a lot of managers that were freaked out because they didn't know what to do and how to initiate these conversations, and it was uncomfortable for them. And so in having some of these facilitations of these discussions of race, you never know what some of the people you're talking to are going to say. And it's very important to be able to pivot, keep the conversation going, and to make sure that everybody is feeling supported throughout the conversation. And so there are many landmines. So a story, and I like where you're going. You can demonstrate these concepts with a story. I've been to a corporate event where a senior leader who knew my spouse, who also works at Wells Fargo, and the senior leader came up to me and said, "Hello, how are you doing? How's Les doing? Are you all still married?" And I thought that was a very interesting comment for him to give to me. And I said, "Yeah, my spouse is doing great. How's your wife? Are the two of you still married?" And so what I try to do is make it a learning opportunity. You don't get emotional if someone says something insensitive. I try to learn from it and focus not on what's being said, but focus on why someone may be saying it. And so in having those discussions, there's lots of little landmines that you have to navigate, and you have to turn into learning opportunities. So the person that you're speaking to learns a little something from it and maybe won't make that mistake moving forward. And I'm always open to learning new ways of handling situations myself. Lots of landmines.
Thank you for that answer. Does anybody else have a follow-up?
Yes, Steve, I think that was a good point that you brought up. Just with a lot of things that have gone on in 2020 that folks have had to deal with, like our company, that was a big initiative that we had also, where we were putting our managers in situations where we were forcing them to talk about topics that traditionally it's like a no, don't touch. And so one of the big things that like our leaders and our managers had to learn is just the art of being vulnerable and being transparent with people, because one of the things that's extremely important that our colleagues and our employees always look at is, where do we stand in silence? So a lot of times, like, being silent and not saying anything says enough and speaks enough volumes. And sometimes it's not the volumes that you really want to be spoken for you. And so, I mean, that was huge. And, you know, we're just proud of like the growth that folks are making, like even like from a leadership standpoint. Like, I've got plenty of calls from people saying, hey, Thomas, like, this is the scenario I don't know how to acknowledge in the situation. I don't know how to empathize in it. And what we're learning is that in a lot of companies and among a lot of leadership, there's a huge need for sensitivity training. And so that's been huge, because you would think that a person that's leading and in a leadership role, they should be able to have casual, normal conversations, show basic empathy, and do basic acknowledgments. But one thing that we learned this year is that some of the things that we thought people should have the ability to do is definitely areas where we're lacking. And so, you know, that's been huge. And so I'm glad that you shared that, because I think that's something that everybody on the panel can relate to, is just going through those different things this year and being thrown into those situations and having to react on it.
I was going to say, one of the things that are landmine, and I don't know if it's landmines as much as it's been learning opportunities for me throughout my career, is building my brand and how to build my brand in a way that represents who I am authentically, and navigating that with gathering feedback, understanding how I am being perceived, how I show up. Am I bringing people along? Am I alienating people in my style and in my process? And am I demonstrating behaviors that I would be proud of? And I think for students kind of listening on this call and talking to various individuals who have matriculated in their career, wherever we are, right? We're leading and developing and talking. I think that's one of the most important things that I could try to communicate. And I think it couples what Thomas and Mr. McLemore have also said. It's being authentic and being transparent and being vulnerable in the work environment. And that even translates back to doing the work, asking for help, and then being accountable. And so those are some of the lessons that I've learned. I don't know if it's vulnerability, but lessons that I've learned in my career. And even I'm learning today, I don't know it all. And so I have allies and relationships and people that I tap on, like, I don't know, help. And so it's okay to have those conversations and be that person, but also be accountable for what you do and what you say. So that's just a piece of information I would add.
So if that's all to be said about that question, we're going to get ready for another one. So what are some tips that you can give students who are either preparing to or already in a job on how to handle microaggressions while at work?
So it's hard. It really is so hard. And I would say that you have to be brave. I went through my first, I don't know, half a dozen years working at Allstate, hiding the pictures of my wife whenever anybody came to my desk, because I just didn't know how people were going to react. And eventually I made the choice within myself that this was a big enough part of me and being authentic that I was not going to hide any longer. And you know, I mentioned I'm active in my community. I do a lot of facilitation in the community. And even I've gotten called, especially I have gotten called on committing a microaggression in the last year. And it's that moment where, okay, I respect you for being brave and telling me how you feel. So be brave, but also it's part of me to stop and be, you know, I love that the word vulnerable keeps coming up, because I had to stop and really examine my behavior. And even though I am well-intentioned and I try to be a good white ally, like I'm gonna screw up. I appreciate being called on it. And then I need to have the grace to learn from that and not invalidate your responses, right? So I would say, be brave. if you do find yourself in a situation where the person is not listening to how you feel and taking you seriously, then that's nothing you can do, right? There's nothing you can do in that space, and it's not you, it's them. So it's probably not the best advice, but it's like, you've got to be brave and strengthen your heart.
Mm-hmm. I completely agree. I completely agree with that. And you will, it will happen, and you will need to be brave. And the biggest piece of advice that I could give anyone who finds themselves in that situation is, first and foremost, don't get emotional. And I'm not talking about crying. It could be anything: angry, frustrated, mad. Try to turn it into a learning opportunity. So don't get emotional, but you need to say something. For me, if I find myself in that situation and I don't say anything about it, I don't address it, I'm gonna mull over it for the next week. And I don't want anybody to have to do that. I should have said this, or I could have said that, and just playing both sides of a conversation of how it could have gone. It takes courage, a courageous conversation. And just, you know, hey, can I ask you something about what you said earlier? And this is where you don't focus on what is being said. You try to focus on why someone would make that microaggression, and assume positive intent. Mm-hmm. They may not even know that this was an insensitive comment. And so that's where you turn it into a learning opportunity. I'm gonna explain to you how this landed on me, so you'll know moving forward if this is the right way you need to communicate. Because and to your point, if you're going to be willing to address that and call that out, you have to be willing to receive that kind of feedback should you misstep and commit an insensitive comment as well. But yeah, first and foremost, courage, because it's going to happen, and you may not handle it right the first, second, or the third time. But dealing with those courageous conversations, it's like a muscle that you need to flex. Yeah. You need to be able to address it in the moment, appropriately, constructively, but you do need to address it, and you get better. You get better in time.
Mr.
I do agree.
Mihalic.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry. I was just gonna note how Mr. Mihalic unmuted himself, so if he wanted to add to the conversation, he could. But go ahead, Ms. Jacobs.
I'm sorry, Mr. Mihalic. I didn't mean to speak over
Feel
you.
free.
I was going to say, like Mr. McLemore and Ms. Blair said, look, work is not going to be peaches and cream. And if we tried to tell you that it was going to be, we would all be lying to you. It's not going to be peaches and cream. You're going to find yourself facing challenges. And if you ever consider yourself like facing a micro or macroaggression, the best tool, as my colleagues have mentioned, is to explain how the comment or behavior has impacted you in a one-on-one discussion. Know what your triggers are also, and know if you are capable of having that conversation in that moment. Because sometimes you've got to walk away and figure out what it is that you want to communicate, so that you can salvage that relationship and continue to have a relationship going forward. And then if you don't know how to form that conversation, seek the advice of a mentor or HR. You can't always control the outcome, but what you can control is explaining to the person how it impacted you. And then hopefully a learning will occur from that, but also respect your environment and your colleagues enough to have the conversation, so that you have an amicable work environment. But it's gonna happen. Something's gonna happen at work that's gonna, put you in a situation where you have to have that courageous conversation. That's my advice.
I was just going to add to the conversation a bit of the idea of reacting without overreacting. They're two very different things. And to Mr. McLemore's point, trying to remove emotion is so wise. And I think that skill is something that we're all working on developing no matter what our age or experience is. But the idea that something must be said, and Mr. Blair, you said something earlier about how silence can speak volumes. And in these conversations, silence does speak volumes. And I have found myself being able to defend a colleague when they're not in the room and I hear a microaggression about them, sometimes much easier than I can when somebody says it directly to me, because that surprise factor hits you. You're not expecting a comment. You're not expecting a slight dig. You're not expecting an odd question like Mr. McLemore said, are you still married? You're just not expecting that. So I think the practice of defending those that aren't in the room can be a good practice for folks in a professional environment. I recently had, as of 4 days ago, I had a conversation with one of my directors, and we were having a development conversation about how to take me to the next level in my career. And I love leading leaders right now, and I love the inspiration, but like I wanted to keep moving up. And it was so interesting. She said to me, she started down this conversation of executive presence, which is a buzzword and is a very dangerous phrase to lead with. And where she went with that really was on the idea of how I dress and how I present. And it was a moment where I had an opportunity to lead up, and that can be very scary. even as a 47-year-old guy, it is very scary to still lead up. And I respect exactly what she's saying. I respect her opinion. I respect her ability to have led for decades and to know the culture and to know the environment, while at the same time, it can be a microaggression. It can be a, how am I presenting myself that makes person A, B, or C feel comfortable? If that's my goal, then I'm not living an authentic life. I'm not fully being me. But there is a churn there. There is a churn in that particular conversation. I don't want to get lost in the story, but just the idea that sometimes with a microaggression, there are opportunities where you can lead up, and it's a little scary.
Mr. Blair, and then I'm going in the order of who unmutes their mic first. Mr. Blair, I noted that you also unmuted your mic. Do you have anything you would like to add?
Yeah, this is just different, but like since we're giving advice, I'm still gonna throw it out there. I think like even when we did our introductions, almost everybody had talked about how they belonged in certain groups that help them around diversity, inclusion, or even help with diversity, inclusion within the workplace. And I think what's also important for people that are getting in the workplace is to be able to have group support. So we're on a phone call right now, and we have multiple professionals across the board, and we're all nodding our heads for the different experiences that people are telling stories about. I think what's been important to all of us is that we've all had good people in our circle as good sounding boards that we can throw different scenarios to, because we do have different things that happen all the time where, you know, in that moment, we may not know what's the right thing to say or how to react or how to respond. And sometimes there's a fear because, like, as you're growing your career, you don't know that if I step out on this limb or on this boundary, could I put myself in a position where I might shortchange myself the rest of the career because maybe I offended somebody or maybe I said the wrong thing. So I think what's also important is making sure you have a good group and a good circle as a soundboard to voice these different things and get sound feedback and advice. So, no. All right. I think so. Part of the thing that's important is if at an organization and company, you guys do have different business resource groups or ERGs or colleague-led communities, finding ways to get involved in that. I think that's very helpful because you do have so many different chains of leadership that happen to participate or be part of those groups. And so if you're in a situation where you are in an awkward conversation and there are microaggressions, if you don't feel comfortable reacting or responding in that moment, maybe there's somebody in that group that you can sit back and tap on the shoulder and say, hey, like, this is something that took place. Like, what advice would you give me, like, as I grow and as I develop? Because, you know, my career is important. I don't want to react the wrong way, or like Mr. McLemore said, get too emotional in that moment and then put myself in an odd, awkward situation. So this is just advice that I do want to throw out there, stuff that, you know, a lot of people that are on the panel do know. Like, there is a lot of good benefit in the different resource groups and the ERGs that companies have available. And that might be a good starting place as a soundboard.
Thank you, Ms. Mack.
Hello. So I love how we brought up job seekers, because especially in my position as a recruiter, I work with people all day, every day that are looking for opportunities. And I think a lot of the times, especially those who, you know, they experience microaggression, whether it's from, you know, a recruiting company like myself who is working with them, or maybe, you know, they're in an interview and they experience it and they're like, oh, well, I don't want to say anything because, like, I want to get this job and this, that, and the third, you know, and I tell people, I'm like, look, at the end of the day, we've been talking here about being our true, authentic self. And what's important is that, you know what, I always tell people too that I work with, I'm like, hey, if I say something and it comes off the wrong way, tell me, because obviously if I can take that and I can learn and grow and we can have a, you know, conversation that focuses on the development on my end, like, especially me being a recruiter and being their employer, I want them to feel like they're comfortable coming to me. And I tell the active job seekers, I'm like, if you don't feel comfortable with that, you know, working with that third party company or that recruiting agency, then maybe those are the individuals you don't want to go in that direction and work with. And then I also tell, especially like recent college graduates and everything, I'm like, hey, ask about like what resource groups that the company has, you know, ask, especially if maybe you are, you know, you're uncomfortable having that direct conversation, understanding like, okay, if this was to happen again, do I have that proper support there? And especially, you know, just me working for a recruiting company, I tell people, I'm like, ask those recruiting companies those questions. Like, what can they offer you? Like, that's what's really important, because again, you want a job that's definitely, you know, not only a job that you enjoy and you love doing, but that you feel comfortable within that environment. So I think that's for, especially all the students on here, don't be afraid to question, you know, and if someone says something to you, like, don't be afraid to bring it up in a conversation. But I think it's really important to understand what type of resource groups you have and that be a part of your job decision as well too.
So to build upon that, so then we can keep the ball rolling, if a person wants to get involved with employee research or special interest groups within the specific organizations that you all work for, what would the groups be and why were they made in the first place, so that students understand the origin and then also understand how it could service them?
What a lovely question. So, you know, at Allstate, what you do is we have our intranet connection, you know, our allstate.com homepage for employees, and you can search for our business resource groups. Our diversity and inclusion area has them really easy to find, which I think is really important. So whenever I coach folks that are looking to start a career, I invite them to look at the corporation's website and make sure that they have a strong commitment to diversity and inclusion that's posted right there for all of the public to see. I also encourage you to look at the board of directors and make sure that the makeup matches the population as you expect it, right? So those are two things as you're investigating a company that you should know and look at. And then once you get in there, make sure you're making use of the intranet and talking to people in your company to make sure that you can get connected with your people that are there. And we find that retention and promotional pathways are actually easier to attain, and you stay at a place because you find your employee resource group. So usually they make them fairly easy to find, but if not, a couple of questions to your new leader should clear that up for you. And if it doesn't, I would say that that's a red flag.
Does anybody else want to tackle that topic?
Yeah, actually, can you repeat the question so I can make sure I got it?
Yes, sir. So the question is, how can students get involved with employee research or special interest groups within your specific organization? And what was the reason why these groups were made so that students understand both the origin and how the group can service them?
Yeah, so I'll tag in a little bit and I'll work in reverse. So for us, we do have like a couple of core business resource groups, or we also call them colleague-led community groups. So it's the same thing as the ERGs, but I think the main purpose of why these things are created is it's all back to having an environment that represents our colleagues and represents our population, where everybody feels that they can be their true authentic self and be included. And so, definitely in the line of business that we do, we want to make sure that like our population and what we're presenting out there also is reflective of our clients and the different companies that we service. So like for our organization, like the couple that we have are the Women's Professional Network, we have the Pride Professional Network, Asian Professional Network, Virtual Professional Network, Latinx Professional Network, and the Black Professionals Network. Those are the main 6, but then we also have groups for our veterans and folks with disability. One of the things that we've really prided ourselves from a marketing standpoint for how we want to get these things out is during new hire orientation, the very first day, the first thing that we talk about is how to get involved with these different resource groups. And so as you guys are working and joining different companies, I think what's important is what the company puts out there first, because that's typically going to be very reflective of what they value. So if getting involved in diversity and inclusion and these different groups seem like an afterthought, then most likely for a company from a value standpoint, they're probably valuing it as an afterthought. If it's one of those things that they put out there immediately on the forefront and being very vocal about it, that should be a pretty tough indicator that that's something that the company is prideful about. And so, definitely one of the ways to get involved is just getting yourself out there. I tell people all the time, like, don't be afraid to get out your shell, meet and greet people. But every company, for the most part, also has different web services that colleagues can get on and do some research. And so go ahead and look things up, try to find like what they're promoting, try to see if it's the best interest. And then from there, like instead of just, sending a casual email and out there to gain interest, challenge yourself to go actually meet somebody that's involved with it, because it's definitely going to give you an opportunity to ask all the questions that you want to ask, but you can sit back and you can judge and see if they're being transparent, open, and honest with you. And, when you get involved with these things, the transparency and honesty, I think that's pretty important. And so I always challenge like folks to have those face-to-faces whenever you can have face-to-faces. Clearly we're in a virtual world now, but anything that you can set up where you can get that one-on-one dialogue to really probe and really see like, is a company truly passionate about these other members, really passionate about these different groups? By all means, please explore those avenues to be able to do that.
I think Thomas makes a really good point. Interviewing a company is just as important as a company interviewing you. Understanding the company culture is just as important as the company understanding you. So do your research around the company and ensure that the values, their vision statement, kind of what their pillars are aligned to an organization where you want to lend your gift and talent. You may make a choice to be at an organization for 20 years, right? And do you want to lend what your God-given gifts and talents are, your chosen gifts and talents are to an organization that you don't support? Also, I do want to provide a point of clarity around the difference between ERGs and BRGs. Companies use them differently. And so employee resource groups are typically groups that are formed for an employee engagement perspective, and they are typically aligned around development, ensuring that you're participating in community outreach and lending your voice to the organization from a employee growth and development perspective. Business resource groups are an evolution of ERGs, and some organizations that are on their journey maybe starting out with smaller ERGs that have grown into business resource groups. And those business resource groups function as an extension of the community that they involve in. So they will work with the business resource groups to gather information on market analysis, data, how is their product selling with a particular demographic. And so it's just really important to understand the organization that you're going to and that you're interested in, and their evolution along that path and along that process as well. Because you may be looking for one thing when you go in the organization and feel that they're not offering it, but they could have evolved to something different. So just some additional points to think through.
And I would just add one thing. We live in an amazing point in history where information is readily available to us. Back when I was interviewing, this is right when the thing called the internet was like out and cool and amazing, and most companies did not have a presence. But now today, most every place will have a presence, whether that is on the internet, whether a person is starting a business and they're getting TikTok followers, or whatever it is. My advice to anyone coming out of college or looking to enter the workforce, and it's been said several different times, if you have to dig for information on inclusion and diversity, which we know are two very different things, if you have to dig to a point where you are peeling away layers and you are expending so much energy to find out what a company truly feels in that space, you have your answer. Mm-hmm. That's what I have to say about that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'd like to add something too. So we've been talking about D&I, and our company has just transitioned from D&I to DEI. So we're adding the E for equity. And I think that this is a good place to talk about that. Is the reasons for the ERGs is so that there were people that looked like you and sounded like you, and you had a community of people to support you, but the support was great, but what did that do for you? And so that equity piece is what lifts everybody up and gets everybody on the same playing field and gives them what they need to propel forward. So that's another good point, is that if you work with a company that has a DEI, their focus is going to be building you up to get you ready for that next level.
Mm-hmm.
So now I have a question that could seem like it's coming a little bit off from left field, but just because of some of the things that you guys have said, and I've noted how you said a word that lets you know that there was a red flag. So are there any words or phrases that students should look out for when trying to enter their specific job field so that they know what's happening versus it going over their head? Or some that you've run into that are very common?
I think there are a lot of sources out there that I would consult. And because I am an LGBTQ person that sits in that space, one of the things that I would look up is their HRC index. Mm-hmm. So there are some external sources that rate companies on different zones within diversity, inclusion, equity. So you can always do a quick Google search to see where they fall. So for me, HRC is kind of the benchmark. I don't know what else. I'll yield to some other panelists to see if there's some other sources to consult. Well, I see Ms. Jacobs' lips moving, but I don't hear her talking.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, I agree with you. The HRC index is a really good place to go, but companies should also have their awards and their affiliations and their partnerships on their company website. So that's another good way to identify an organization and where they're affiliated. But I thought I interpreted the question a little bit differently, and it is 7:52, and I'm in the same age bracket as Mr. Richards, so I might have misunderstood you. But I thought you were asking for like buzzwords to stay away from in the work environment. And what I would say is just don't overcommit. If you don't know something, just say you don't know something and ask. There's a lot of stuff that, even today, even though I've been in my career 20 plus years, I don't know what you're talking about. What do you want? Like, how can I help you? What exactly is it? But I joke, but it is a way to gain clarity so you have understanding on what the expectation is of you so you can deliver on that. So I would say just be yourself. There's no magic bullet to come into work and to be perfect, right? your work is going to speak for yourself. Your brand is going to speak for yourself. Your character is going to speak for you. If you don't know, raise your hand and say, I don't know. If you're looking for something else, ask someone who you think is emulating behavior that you want. Recognize those who are not and don't emulate that behavior. And it'll come together. It's like sauce. You might put a little salt here, a little pepper here, a little garlic here, and it comes together for you, at the end of the day as you continue to grow. So don't put so much pressure on yourself to be perfect. Just be you, come in, learn, grab opportunities, and just contribute at the level that is natural for you.
So one of the last questions that I'm going to ask before we open the floor up for students to come at you with their plethora of questions is, what does diversity in the workplace mean specifically to you?
All right, I'm going to bite. I'll bite first. So, for me, I want to bring my true, authentic self to work. And there's a quick story that I'll give where at a previous job, I was at probably Costco with my spouse, and I kind of knew the president of the school, and I was wary. And so when I ran into her and her husband at Costco, I acknowledged, but I did not introduce my husband. And the next day at work, she called me out on that. And she said to me, I was disappointed that you didn't introduce your husband. And she says, I'm very tolerant. And I said, that's why I didn't introduce my husband. I'm not looking for someone to tolerate me in my relationship. I'm looking for someone to celebrate me in my relationship. And for me, you tolerate crying babies, you tolerate barking dogs. And so what diversity means to me is you celebrate me and who I am and all of my my gifts that I bring to my role. And you provide me with an environment where I feel safe and I feel comfortable contributing. And you're going to get the best work out of me if you do that for me. So that's kind of what, diversity means for me.
I saw something posted recently on LinkedIn, and I thought this was so cool. It talks about diversity being invited to the party. And so diversity is, have you guys seen that? Being invited to the party. Inclusion is being asked to dance, and belonging is dancing like nobody's watching. So for me, when I think about the DEI statement that we represent as a company, it is ensuring that equity is in place for every employee in the organization, whether you fall into a category of people of color, if you fall into a category of sexual orientation, if you're a veteran, or if you are a white male or female in our organization. The resources that are available to you to help you navigate your career are available to you to tap into whenever you need them. And LaQuenta may need one thing this week, right? I may need orange juice this week. And Mr. McLemore may need it in 2 weeks, but the refrigerator is stocked with orange juice so that when I open it, I can get it when I need it. And it's not overly complicated. It is an environment where people lead inclusively. It's an environment where our systems remove bias. And it's an environment where we're open to feedback and we treat each other with dignity and respect. And that's what diversity and inclusion and equity is for me and what I try to champion in our organization.
At LPL, we encourage all of our employees to join all of the ERGs. So you never know what you don't know. So hearing different stories, being exposed to different people, being with a whole new group and experiencing different things just opens new doors, and you get to gain so much more by stepping out of your comfort zone and going to experience something completely new and different.
So Shannon, one of the things that we're doing at our organization is I have a barrier to employee resource groups that's creating silos. And so on a quarterly basis, we get all of our employee resource groups together and we talk about 3 pillars. We talk about recruitment, we talk about development, we talk about our community outreach, and we talk about our employee survey results as a collective company. And then we go and we work in our groups, you know, to drive those particular pillars and initiatives within the business units that we have. And that is one of the ways I love the idea of encouraging everyone to participate, right? Be an ally, and participate in your organization, because there is invaluable experience that you will gain from people who don't look like you, walk like you, talk like you, or think like you. Some of my closest relationships are with people who I wouldn't have grown up in my neighborhood with, right? And I've experienced life because of what they've introduced me to, or what my friends have introduced me to. So, you know, open your palette and embrace kind of the diversity within your organization.
Mm-hmm.
I would say for me, diversity, ask me tomorrow, I may have a different answer. But tonight, for me, diversity really centers around the idea of understanding my privilege. And if I understand my privilege, it allows me to view the rest of humanity much more empathetically than I would on a day when I don't have that mindset. Diversity impacts, and Ms. Jacobs, you said it impacts recruiting, it impacts hiring, and impacts retention. So diversity to me, what it means for me tonight is really understanding my privilege. And I did not know what tonight's panel would hold. I was excited to be a part of this, and quite frankly, visually, I am likely the most privileged individual sitting on this panel. I may be part of the LGBTQ community, but I walk into a space that may be full of straight white men, and I can pass that fast, and there's no barrier. So to me, diversity really, and I think we're all learning this a lot over these last few months, is embracing and fully understanding your privilege.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, those are great points. I think like everybody at some point, like on the panel, have all had experiences where they might have walked into a room and like you get that feeling of being uncomfortable, or be in a certain environment and hear certain dialogues and conversations, you might get that uncomfortable feeling in the pit of your stomach. And we've all been in situations where you felt like you may have to look over your shoulder or second guess like your thoughts, or even second guessing things to say. And, you know, when I think about diversity and inclusion, I think about like, what would it be like if in a work environment or just in the world in general, people are free from having to deal with those experiences, and people are free from like that mental strain and stress that it puts on it. And those are all things that we're challenged with. And so when we think about diversity and inclusion, like not only is it things that we've got to value in the workplace, but it's things that we got to value outside of work. It's all about challenging ourselves to learn more today than what we learned yesterday. And when we think about where a lot of mistakes that we make, it's all about like, a lot of times it happens because we're not challenging ourselves to be open and to learn more. And so, you know, when it comes to diversity and inclusion, I think it begins with just being open to learn more and be open to be more receptive to others around us, and knowing that the world doesn't revolve around all things Thomas Blair, all things Miss Jacob, or all things with McLemore. Like it revolves around the whole world. And so, you know, these are great answers, and I think this has been a blessing to be able to participate in this panel, guys. This is awesome.
Mm-hmm.
No, I love all these points that people are giving. Like I'm just sitting here and I'm like trying not to like smile, but like it's just awesome just collaborating like this. As you guys can tell, I'm very much a people person, very much an extrovert. But I think with me, when it comes to diversity, it's being that ally. So also too, you know, in my position, understanding my privilege and how, you know, what I need to do to not only be an ally to my peers that are coming from, you know, whether it's a different, you know, racial standpoint, socioeconomic, you know, gender, whatever, wherever they're coming from, it's not only being an ally, but it's also holding my peers accountable if they're not being that ally. And I'll even tell you within our company, you know, not only internally are we working on, you know, our diversity initiatives, but also too, we're working with other companies, we're working with other managers, you know, it's holding them accountable too, and being like, hey, like, you're telling us that you're wanting, you know, to follow along with your overall company's diversity inclusion, but, you know, X, Y, and Z is not creating that safe space. And this is what we need to do to work together to create that safe space, to create that sense of belonging for someone. So that's how I see it within my eyes, is not only, you know, being an ally, but also holding your peers accountable as well too.
So I love that, because so I see it two different ways. And I think it was Ms. Jacobs that said about diversity of thought. I worked for a really toxic organization where a vice president hired in his image, and everyone that he hired thought like him and looked like him and behaved like him. And it was like, I got to a point where I was like, this is the most stagnant organization I have ever been in, and I am dying here. And moved teams. So, you know, they say you don't quit jobs, you quit bosses. That's 100% true. For me, the diversity of thought is what moves you forward. So if I hire in my image, or if I try to find people who think exactly like me, I am not going to get the best product. I'm not going to get the best ideas. So being able to surround myself with a diversity, with all types of diversity, just makes me a better leader. It makes me a better person. As a femme passing lesbian, though, I have to be really intentional about asserting who I am, because I remember it was National Coming Out Day. Richard and I were friends. We go back. I posted this Facebook post, which is also an old person thing. I've come to realize that, you know, we got to get you on TikTok,
Blair.
I know. I don't have time for one more social. I don't know. Okay, so I started at Allstate, and there was nobody that looked like me in leadership at all. And I remember thinking like, oh my gosh, if I am not quiet about who I am, I will never get promoted and I will never be a leader. So I've always had this idea that for me, diversity means that whatever step I take and however hard it was to take it, I have a responsibility to hold the door open behind me and make sure that other people know how to find me and can climb after me. And I'm looking for those people ahead of me that are climbing ahead of me too. So that's another actual power of the ERG or BRG, is that once you find your network, you know, there are people that are holding the door open for you.
So now we're about to open up for student questions, but I just want to make sure that everybody who is on the call knows that some of the participants of the panel have actually interacted in the chat. So please feel free to either interact back with them or take the information that was given to us. So that being said, does anybody want to start off with the first question? If so, please state your name, your major, and also what year you are.
Hello, my name is Shanoy Challenger, and I'll go first. I'm a senior at Johnson C. Smith, and my major is criminal justice. Like Ms. Blair and Mr. Richard, I work at Allstate also. I work in property as an adjuster. Been there for about 5 years, so not as long as you guys. But I do have a question for Mr. Richard. So having a team of adjusters, what do you do to make sure that you hold them accountable for diversity and making sure that, you know, they apply that?
It really depends. It's situational, right? So currently right now, I'm actually leading a team of managers who have adjusters that report to them. So as a leader, as a servant leader, it's very important that I listen, and I listen to the conversation. And I invite a different type of thought when the conversation is extremely boxed. So with the leaders that I am currently overseeing, as you know, Allstate right now is in a hiring freeze. But in these moments where we are able to hire and we're able to recruit, I go back about a year, and this is a long way to tell the story, but I go back about a year when I was able to sit under the teachings of Amber Hikes, who is the Chief Equity and Inclusion Officer of the ACLU, and she preached. What she preached and what she proselytized to me, I bought hook, line, and sinker. And this is what I ask all of my leaders and all of my adjusters to do. Give the space away. Do not hire, as Blair said, in your own image. When you look at a company, you'll see the face of the place, and then when you start to trickle down, you really see the face of the place. And so it's really about challenging the norms. It's about challenging conversations and having difficult conversations. It's about correcting. It's about educating, and it's about doing all of that with a heart of service, with a bit of finesse, and with some empathy. So when we are dealing with customers, you know, you have somebody on the phone. In a lot of environments and a lot of industries, you are you have folks that are dealing front-facing with customers. And it's just a good reminder that you never know a person's background. You never know the day that the person has had. You don't know the life the person has had. And so I preach a lot of empathy.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Does another student have a question?
Yes, I have one. What was we supposed to say? Our name, our class, and our major?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Lazaria Bowens. I am a psychology major, and I am a senior. I remember earlier I was talking about interviewing the company is just as important as them interviewing you. So, like, what are some key things you would say that we should be like looking for, quote unquote, like interviewing the company or whatever?
So I want to start off with this because, again, whenever I have candidates that I'm working with that are interviewing with some of my clients, this is like one of the biggest things that I really discuss with them, even in the beginning steps. I'm like, hey, I want you to check out this company. I want you to make sure that this is aligning with everything you're looking for. So I think that's the first thing. As an active job seeker is seeing, okay, as I'm about to graduate here, what am I looking for within that first step within my career? What type of support do I need? And then from there, it's identifying, okay, like what kind of questions can I ask, managers or recruiters that are working for third-party companies like myself, and being like, hey, do you have X, Y, and Z that can kind of help provide this support for me? I think we all talked about how now we have the internet. It's so easy to kind of look up things. And I was going to say earlier, not just looking up a company's general page, but LinkedIn, I know, is very popular, and seeing kind of what is the company posting, are they just kind of posting these broad statements, or are they posting these statements, but then following it up with things that they're doing within the community or initiatives that they're doing within the company itself. I think that's really important. So when it comes to research, really just looking at all avenues, not just company website, but platforms that they may utilize to promote their company, and then really understanding what you're looking for. So for example, if you're like, I want a group that's going to make me feel like I belong here, that I have proper resources, asking flat out, whether it's recruiters like me or managers being like, hey, like what resources do you provide for individuals like myself? I think that it's totally okay to ask that question. And if they don't give you the answer that you're looking for, then maybe that's not the best company that you want to start your career off within.
Yeah, Mack, I think you make a good point. I'm sorry, go ahead, Shannon.
No, go ahead.
No.
Go ahead. Okay, just to piggyback on what Max said, another thing that you can ask is, what's your culture? Using that word culture, you're not going to find that usually from the internet. You'll find that from fellow employees. You'll find that from the person that's doing the interview, and listen for key words when they're talking about culture, that it fits with your heart. So if it's a casual environment, if it's a fun environment, if it's personal development focused, if those things resonate with you, then you know it's a good fit. So culture is always a good question to ask during the interview process.
I was going to say to Shannon, you kind of took the words out of my mouth, but also ask them, ask the leader or the person you're interviewing with, or the recruiter, why do they enjoy working for the company?
Mm-hmm.
Like what gives them joy in being part of that organization, and listen to that. Leverage your recruiter to give you information. If you have questions around benefits, if you have questions around leadership development, leverage your recruiter to be able to give you that information. If you don't feel comfortable asking that in the interview process, your recruiter or the talent acquisition person that's bringing you on board can be a really good resource for you to ask in a safe space. And for you to get the information that you need. And then I think, as Mack mentioned, know what's important to you. What kind of culture do I want to work in? Do I want to work in an environment that, is inclusive? Do I want to work in an environment that does this or does that? And kind of seek that out in the process.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple things on it. I think also, as you look at interviewing a company, pay attention to what they're getting involved with. And so if there's different things within the community that you can link back to the company and the organization, I think that's going to stand out some more. But I was also taught, where a person's treasure is, that's also where their heart is. So look at where they're making contributions at, because typically they're going to contribute to something that they find is valuable. And then for you, as you're looking as a company, you should be able to see where they're making their contributions within their own community. If that's lacking there, then that's going to be a telltale sign of what they may not value and where their priorities might be elsewhere. So just look at those things.
That's a fantastic point. They're philanthropic endeavors. So when my spouse, who has been with Wells Fargo for over 20 years, when Wells Fargo relocated him to St. Louis, we were not married yet. And so another place is that the benefits package. We were in a relationship. His benefits package including getting a career coach for me to get my resume redone so that I could find work in St. Louis as well. And I thought that was amazing because, again, we were not married at the time. And also at the time, Missouri was not a state that had same-sex marriage. And so looking at that benefit package, there are resources that Wells Fargo offers for gender reassignment surgery. I mean, those are the things that, you look at and you're like, okay, this is interesting. This resonates with me. So yeah, the philanthropic endeavors, the benefits package, that gives you an idea as to what that culture is like as well. Absolutely.
And navigating the benefits package can be hard for an entry-level professional coming into the work environment. So many of us have gone to college with people that have gone before us. Talk to your friends who have graduated, ask them what were some of the questions that they had around benefits, what were some of the mistakes that they've made, and get advice so that you don't have to repeat the same mistakes. Reach out to people in your family if you have that resource, or reach out to your guidance counselor at school and ask them to connect you with people in the organization who can help you navigate some of those very tough conversations, or even figuring it out, right? What's an HSA over an FSA? And do I want benefits? Do I waive benefits? Do I get vision? Do I need dental? All of that kind of stuff. Am I saving for a 401k? All of that stuff seems very common to us, but it's intimidating to a new student. So make sure that you ask questions of your friends and your family members and get practical advice. And again, leverage a recruiter to help you navigate that.
Oh my gosh, that's so savvy. I wish someone had given me that advice as I left college. I just started working in corporate America and crossed my fingers.
Yeah.
Does another student have a question? Also, if you don't feel comfortable asking the question out loud, please feel free to type it in the chat and I'll say it out loud for you, or message or get a contact information for any of the panelists so that you can ask them privately.
Will they be listing their information?
Yes, they will. It's slowly trickling into the chat.
Okay.
So once again, does anybody else have another question that they would like to ask the panelists? If not, I would like to ask my question because I have some questions. Because you guys were talking and I was catching certain things and I was like, wait, but the conversation has changed. So I can't really go back to that right then. So may I ask my question?
Absolutely.
So I know that this has been a heated topic of conversation in terms of inclusion and diversity. So how does your organization see fit to handle the issue of checking a box? So we know that in the current era that we're living in, a lot of boxes don't apply to individuals, whether it has to do with race, gender, sexuality, and so on and so forth. So how is your individual companies going forward with the checking of the box, and how do you view the option of reviewing, taking away the checking of a box on applications?
So I'll take a stab at that. I will definitely tell you the evolution of kind of the D&I space, DEI space, DI belonging, diversity and inclusion, you know, has evolved. It used to be very compliance based, where it was about meeting aspirational goals or checking boxes. And it has moved and evolved as our communities have evolved, as our employees have evolved, as issues have evolved. There are certain components that a company, and I do think it's important to spend this time kind of talking to students about this. There are certain components that companies have to report on, right? Depending on the type of company that you may work for. So if you're a federal employer, or if you have certain contracts, there's certain things that you have to report on. But what you want to look for in an organization is the flexibility to self-ID or to self-identify or not, and to not be penalized for not checking a box per se. So you really want to make sure that you're looking for an organization that gives you the freedom to show up to work, how you need to show up to work, and what you choose that to be. And that is very fluid for a lot of people, and it changes for a lot of people. And so you want an organization to allow you the flexibility to be fluid if you want to be, right? And so that's really where I would go with answering that question. And you get that from, like Shannon said, asking questions about the culture. You know, how inclusive are they, specifically around LGBTQ plus needs, benefits, resources that are available to you. Those are the ways that you will figure out if that's the place where you belong. So a little bit of a technical question and a little bit a technical answer and a little bit of a non-technical answer.
Mm-hmm.
It is interesting, the checking of the box, because I remember at Allstate fighting for the box so that we could self-ID as lesbian or gay, and we could be counted in the population, and people could find us and see us and help us build promotional pathways and development. So I think that what I would say is that being able to check the box is also kind of a privilege. Like it's weird. And I think that when I hear check the box, my immediate kind of gut feeling is like, oh, that's bad. Like we're doing quotas and counting and then at the same time, I was like, man, I fought for that box. So I agree with Ms. Jacobs that being able to self-ID is important if you want to, but it shouldn't be something you have to do.
So once again, the floor, oh, what happened?
Does that answer your question, Ashley?
Yes. So once again, the floor is open for any student questions. I know that a student did type into the chat how they are having a great time listening, and they were able to actually take a lot of notes from today's conversation. So just to put that out there, so then the panelists could realize they're warm and fuzzy, how they've been helping everybody.
So, you know what, I kind of want to put a topic out there because it's been touched on a couple of times, and I think it's really important now more than ever, is the concept of allyship. And I know at least at Wells Fargo, we've got a lot of people who are allies, but now it's no longer about wearing a button that says I'm an ally. It's no longer about having a certificate at your cube that says I'm an ally. People are wanting to do more. And so one of the questions that I keep getting a lot is, what can I do as an ally to move the needle forward? You know, they're scared of the pitfalls, of the landmines that are out there. They're scared to say the wrong thing or do the wrong thing. And, but they want to do more and they just don't know what to do. And for me, it's get comfortable being uncomfortable. That's my first piece of advice, because it's going to take some courageous conversations. And to your point, I believe, Blair, I think you said it is almost easier to advocate for someone else than it is to advocate for yourself. Mm-hmm. And so, you know, being an ally for me is using your privilege, using your power, using your influence to advocate for those communities that are underrepresented. And I think that's really, really important to provide steps that our allies can actually take to get out there and advocate for us. So what is an ally? I mean, for you, I'm asking some of the other people on the panel, what is an ally for you, and what kind of advice would you give an ally who wants to do more than just wear a button that says I'm an ally?
For me, it's speaking up when I see things that are not right, and having those courageous conversations, and not necessarily telling the person that I had that conversation for them. Mm-hmm. Right. It's being present, and in an environment where I'm holding people accountable. Sometimes it's appropriate, to tell someone like, hey, I had this conversation on your behalf. I could tell that made you uncomfortable, but that's not the purpose of allyship. Allyship is being empathetic and available and supporting of your colleagues and of your friends at work, absent of them having to ask you to do that. So I also think it's available to share your knowledge. And as Blair said, it's holding the door open for somebody else, but not just holding the door open for them, showing them how to get through the door, right? Mm-hmm. And helping develop someone else. So to me, it just comes down to basic principles. Good people, servant leadership, right? It's just being good to people. And it doesn't matter if we look the same, walk the same, grew up with the same socioeconomic background. We're both here. We both deserve to be here. And the plate is open for both of us. Let's eat, mm-hmm. Right? That's kind of the way I see it.
Yeah, and
find those people that wear your sweatshirt.
Also,
sorry, Blair.
No, you're fine. Also, a part about like allyship is just giving people platforms to be vocal and express themselves. So one of the things that we had a revelation with our company is that whenever we finally got to the point where, and a lot of it was sparked off of the things that have been happening lately with the George Floyd incidents and a lot of other things that happened in 2020. But when we finally got to the point where we took the time to give our colleagues platforms to be vocal and really express how they're feeling and the things that they're going through. Those were the most powerful meetings that we've had all year long. And I think from a leadership standpoint, people felt ashamed because like our colleagues were going through so much and it was overlooked on a daily basis, but we never gave them the opportunity to be able to put that out there and then provide them the right type of support to continue to hear them out and follow up from there. And so, like I always say, that's always going to be the important thing is having that avenue where people can be vocal and where they feel like they're in an environment where they can trust you as a person. And at the same time, they can be protected when they continue to express themselves and express the things that they're going through.
Mm-hmm.
I would add that allyship, like most things in life, is typically a spectrum. So if somebody is new to allyship in whatever conversation that we're having, I'll take it, right? It's a start. And if that entry level allyship has to do with I'm acknowledging my ignorance in this area, I'll take it all day long. Allyship being a spectrum, as somebody moves in their allyship journey from just recognizing either an ignorance or a lack of education to activism, we'll take that, right? So whatever conversation we are having in the ally field, I always try to frame it with it's a spectrum. So trying to figure out, ask the right questions where a person is, and try to see if we can massage and invite them into the next step. Because frankly, I need to be massaged and invited into the next steps in certain areas where I am not an activist and I am just kind of more of a nominal ally. We all experienced George Floyd in a virtual environment, right? Whether we were at work, whether we were in summer school, no matter where we were, we saw this unfold on a screen in front of us. And we did not have the ability to interact, to have the conversations, and it creates both a wall and a unique opportunity in terms of an ally conversation where we can break some of that. So, you know, from an ally standpoint, when it comes to racial injustices, my job is hopefully to be invited to the table and then to sit back and be quiet and simply listen, to support, to march with, to do those kinds of things. In terms of the spectrum of allyship, even in that area, I know super allies that are going to their local governments, that are going to their city councils, that are talking to their police chiefs, that are like, you know, that are doing some work that I haven't even yet been able to do for several reasons. But allyship is always a spectrum. So whether we're talking about race, whether we're talking about feminism, whether we're talking about LGBTQ plus issues, it is always a spectrum, in my opinion.
Thank you.
I like something you said earlier, Richard, and I put it in the chat, that being an ally is using your privilege for somebody else also. And I'm stealing that quote, and I'm going to call it my Richard my Richard quote, because I think that is such a great way of thinking about it. It's about using your privilege to help somebody else.
So one of the students, Ms. Hill, put in the chat a two-part question. So I'm going to ask the first one. It's, how do you all feel about performative activism, whether in or out of the workplace?
Bold question. Slacktivism, I probably am the one that should not speak on this, so I want somebody else to take this.
Tell me what you mean by performative activism. Tell me what that is.
Ms. Hill, do you mind typing it in the group chat?
I can just speak really quick. By performative, first let me introduce myself. My name is Shakira Hill. I am a senior psychology major from Richmond, Virginia. Performative activism, I define as someone who posts as like, oh, Black Lives Matter, but my next post is gonna be me sitting on the beach relaxing. Or, oh, let's stick up for our LGBTQ plus sisters and brothers, but 5 minutes later, I'm gonna post about jumping to Starbucks. So performative activism, I kind of define as someone doing it just for the likes and the recognition, and not because they genuinely stick with the Black Lives Matter movement or they stick with our LGBTQ plus brothers and sisters.
And Shakira, I would add, and I'm not answering, I want to add to that, or companies that check the box and say, we support A, B, and C, and in their actions, they do not.
Or
it's
like they say, or like they say, oh, we stand with you, we're listening, we see you, we hear you, but you do nothing of the sort. As in, take for instance, like a makeup page, your feed is 98% white women. And then you have maybe one white gay male, and then you may have one Black woman in all of your posts from the past 6.5 months. But leading up to that, you didn't post anyone that was of color. You didn't post anyone that was in a marginalized group.
Yeah, I think one that popped up over like the last couple of months that was pretty popular is back when, well, not back, but it's when it was attributed to Black Lives Matter. Like a lot of companies were coming out with slogans and statements saying, hey, we stand with Black Lives Matter. But then people were reversing it and they were like, well, show me your board. If you're standing with Black Lives Matter and they truly do matter, like, what does your board look like? Show me like truly that Black Lives Matter. And so, yeah, I mean, like that's a good one. And that's something that's out there it's a sensitive topic. It's a hot topic actually, but you know, like it shows like where companies and what people truly value. And so, yeah, I mean, 2020 has been an eye opener, and that was definitely a big one.
So I think I'm sorry, Blair, go ahead.
No, go ahead, you first.
I was going to say, I think, you know, one of the things, and I'll be very candid with you, that we did as our organization is during the George Floyd unrest, we held conversations with our Black employees to understand exactly what they were feeling, to give them an outlet. Many of our Black employees, including myself, felt exhausted. We were tired. It was a trauma that we had felt over and over again, but we were finally feeling heard. And I say we because I identify as a Black female. And so our organization was very specific in the statement that we put out. And our president was very specific in saying, yes, I can go and support a march, or yes, I can go and hang a flag. But if the company that I run doesn't reflect the values and beliefs that I feel are important to all employees, then I have done my employees a disservice. So I'm first looking internally at my organization to say, what are my systems? What do my systems say? What are our promotion numbers? What does our board look like? What does our executive leadership team look like? What do we look like as an organization? And are we walking the walk and talking the walk? So I think is that Shakira, I hope I'm saying your name right, or Miss Hill.
Yes, that's correct.
I think, okay, perfect. What I think you have to do is look at what the company is representing, as Thomas has mentioned. What are their numbers around their executive board? What is their accessibility program? Where they invest in their money? And really look and see if that organization is supporting the things that are important to you. It's also important to understand if that organization will give you the space and time for you to do the things that are important to you outside of work. And for you to also champion issues for yourself that are important. And so those are the things that I think kind of turn back to it and how you hold an organization accountable. And then the last thing I will say is I spend my money where I feel valued. I work where I feel valued.
Yeah.
I just go to church where I feel valued, right? I eat dinner where I feel like I'm going to be respected. So you have the power to vote. And you always have the power to vote in an organization with your decision to stay or your decision to give your gifts and talents someplace else.
I will say, Ms. Jacobs, in the chat, she had asked, how do you call out that performative activism? And you've just nailed it. you've hit the nail on the head. That is how you call it out. Where am I going to give my time, my energy, my space, my money, my emotion? That's how you call it out. And that's how we do that collectively, whether we're talking a work environment, a professional environment, or a personal environment. I think that's how we call it off, because if somebody is going to try to profit and off of the tokenization of who I am, no, thank you.
Absolutely. I'm not buying makeup from the organization that doesn't have a brand or a color for me. You know?
Exactly.
That's not where I'm shopping. So, you know, we have the ability to put our dollars and use our dollars wisely.
Does another student have a question for any of the panelists?
I have another one. This is Lazaria again, psychology major. So for the process for seeking a job in general, because I'm a student athlete, and that kind of like weighs in on a lot of things on the process of seeking a career force or whatever, because of my timing. So like I haven't been able to like get any internships and stuff just because of timing, because it will like fall in place of practice or games or something like that. So like without having that experience of like an internship or whatever, how would you say, like, I don't really know how to word it, but to get into that next process without having that, I guess, would be the best way to say it, if that makes sense.
Yes, it did. And so I went to a women's college. I'm in Roanoke, Virginia, so I'm up here. And one of the things that my women's college sold was internships. All day, every day, study abroad and internships, and how important both of them were. Did I do either of them? No. So I would say that, you know, play your sports, play hard, be the best that you can be. Don't worry about it. You're going to be fine. A lot of people don't walk into the job market with a ton of really great internships behind you. It's your spirit that matters. And if you can come into your interview and you can tell me, like, you know, I may not have any internships, but this is why, or you don't even have to say that. Like, I am a committed athlete. To me, that means just as much.
Yeah, and I think Celia hit the nail on the head, because even when you think about, like, as an athlete, like, if you ever speak to former athletes, we all speak the same language. There's a lot of discipline and dedication that's put into playing a sport. So it's a lot of up at 5 a.m. in the morning, like weights and study sessions and practices and more practices than the games. And so you think about time management, like as a student athlete, like the one thing that you have to have the skill for is time management. And you think about how that correlates over in the work environment. Time management is a huge skill. Like working together on a team, that means that you know how to work with people and work together like as a unit. So when you think about like things that we value in an environment, teamwork, working together as a team player, like that's something that you get from sports. So what I would say is don't discredit the fact that you haven't had the opportunity to do internships, and don't discredit the fact that you are a student athlete, because as a student athlete, there's a lot of value in the things that you do just to be a student athlete that companies and recruiters do look at and they do see as a positive. Some of the things like just as much a positive, if not more, than an actual internship. So, you know, have your confidence there as being a student athlete, and knowing that, you know, you still have a lot to bring to the table. And just like my guy, LeBron James always says that, you know, our people are always more than an athlete. So definitely keep pride in that.
Yeah, all those things are transferable on your resume. So take all that student athlete information and get that on your resume. Another thing that I could suggest is professional organizations in your field. I don't know what they would be for you, but for me in HR, we've got SHRM, and there's several others that you can join. That actually, especially for the HR, that's going to be more than an internship, is being a member of those professional organizations. So get involved in those.
I would also say I just recently kind of facilitated a workshop with my alumni organization around your elevator speech or your personal brand. and how to build your own personal brand and tell that story during an interview, I would encourage you to think about 3 things. Who am I? What are my strengths? And what do I bring to the table? And put it into a very concise sentence that allows you to tell someone who you are. And for example, I'll do kind of a live demonstration. If you're a student athlete, I'm a dedicated individual who is committed to a team, who knows how to contribute and give and perform to meet my goals. That's your story. And you can tell your story in an interview process that is absent from an internship, and you're sharing with your interviewer and the interview panel what you're going to bring to the organization: commitment, an understanding of teamwork, an understanding of the company goals. And so that's what you can bring to the table.
I so agree with that. This panel was founded on the topic of diversity, and instead of what do I lack that another candidate has that I don't, what do I have that everyone else does not have? So when you come to the table being a student athlete and you talk about, I mean, LaQuenta, what you just said, I want to write down. It was great. Bring that and be the best version of you. That is where your power is. No matter who you are or where you're coming from, when you are your most authentic self, that is your power. So when somebody walks into an interview with me and I see that they were in the armed services, I don't need to draw 75 other conclusions. I already know that that person is disciplined. I know that person is going to be dedicated to a cause. When somebody walks into an interview and they've been working at a fast food restaurant for the last 16 years and they're trying to make a change, that tells me that person is dedicated, that person knows how to deal with customers that fast, that person knows the business, they know how to. So no matter what you have, be the best version of you. That grit that you bring to whatever court or field or whatever it is that you do, that grit is going to serve you very well. And I look forward to you being my boss.
And I also want to include, like, not only you being a student athlete, but I think any student that's a part of this discussion, if you've had, like, you know, been a part of student organizations or done volunteering or being a part of committees, that's all experience that you can talk about. Especially through, you know, I work a lot with recent college graduates and I hear that where they're like, Mack, I didn't have an internship. Like, how do I tell them about my professional experience? I'm like, whoa, like, you don't need to have an internship to talk about that. Like, we're a part of all these committees and organizations and this project in school. Like, I want to hear more about that. And I've even had individuals who, you know, they were interviewing against someone who did have an internship experience, but because they were passionate and they, you know, were about like what they've done during their undergraduate career, and they were able to showcase that passion and interest. You know, I've had managers go for the individual with, you know, maybe not that internship because of how they were able to speak about their skills. So I think it's any experience in college, talk about it, put it on your resume. Whether just because it wasn't paid doesn't mean that it's not experience that you've had.
So does anybody have one more really quick question before we wrap up for this evening?
It's not really a question, but I can say that, like, from an athlete perspective, me mentioning that I did play sports and I was in organizations definitely helped me in an interview recently. And it did, like, it made them see that I was dedicated, even though I'm not available all the time. I have a strict schedule that I have to stick to. They still saw that I was a good candidate for the
And you want to be you. Like, go into that job interview and tell them who you are and be authentic. And if they don't hire you, it's because you weren't a cultural fit and that you dodged a bullet. You did. You want to be hired for the person that accepts you, the whole you.
With that being said, once again, we would like to say thank you to the panelists, esteemed guests, and Smithites that joined in on this call, either via Zoom or via YouTube. If you have any questions for the panelists, please feel free, if you are on Zoom, to take advantage of the chat with their information in it. And if you are not in this Zoom call, please feel free to reach out to Ms. Youngblood. I am 90% sure she has all the contact information for all of the panelists today, so that you can also take advantage of them sharing their time with us. And if anybody has any closing remarks, now would be the time, so that everybody can wrap up and have a nice evening.
I just want to reiterate, thank you to the panelists, absolutely, excuse me, for your time this evening. Thank you, Ashley, for the great job that you did as our moderator. We really appreciate the questions that you had, the challenging remarks that you made. Thank you so much. So just want to make sure that everybody has, and I see a lot of thank yous in the chat and a lot of interactions in the chat going on. So just wanted to say that we really appreciate your time. I know that it's an evening, and we asked you for 2 hours, which I thought we'd take about an hour and a half, but we got really into it. And so we took almost that full 2 hours, but certainly thank you all for giving us that time, because this was a much needed conversation, especially right now in the society that we're living in. So thank you all so much. Have a great evening.
Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you all.
Yes.